City Councilor Tito Jackson, was referred to the committee back on May the 24th of 2017. And this proposal would prevent Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, from entering BPS schools unless they follow specific procedures. If approved, ICE agents would not be allowed to enter BPS sites without a signed warrant from a judge, an explicit written permission from the superintendent and district attorney. BPS will refuse all voluntary information sharing with ICE, and this would codify the current practice that BPS may not ask for or inquire proof of legal immigration status upon enrollment. I will now turn the microphone over to the lead sponsor, City Councilor Tito Jackson, for further opening comments, and then we're going to get right into a panel discussion. We're also joined here by my colleague, City Councilor Josh Zakem. We'll allow both Councilor Jackson, Councilor Zakem to give opening comments. We'll go to a panel, and then we're going to offer to public testimony. Chair recognizes Councilor Tito Jackson.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I want to thank you for expediting this hearing, and I know you are very busy, and as a citywide councilor have many requirements of you, and so I just want to thank you for the opportunity to do this hearing in such a timely manner. I come before you as a vessel of the community and a youth-led movement. This is actually, to me, the best type of government. Government that comes from the community, is brought forward by the community and guided by the community. I want to thank, and actually I want to be even more specific. It makes it even better when it's young people who do it. And the youth of St. Stephen's, the student immigrant movement, BSAC, as well as COSECHA, are organizations that came together after the announcements around these specific issues and the issues that we're having nationally around immigration, to really think about what's going to happen to our young people, what's going to happen to the families in the city of Boston and in the Boston public schools. Our school district is one that has over 50% of the students have at least one parent who speaks a language other than English. And we are proud of that. We are happy about that every single day. But we also know there is a great deal of fear, a great deal of trepidation in and around that community. And what I heard and what moved me the most was I heard a story, and I just want to give credit to Boston public school teachers. We live in a day and age where teachers are talked about, dogged every day. Our teachers work hard, and they work hard with some of the most vulnerable students. And in addition, they came to this hearing and stayed till past 9 o'clock. And no, they weren't on the clock. And they were standing up for their students. And one of the stories I heard almost brought tears to my eyes. And there was a story that someone said, that someone told about a young person bringing their fluffy animal to school on on a day that you're not supposed to bring it. And when connected with the teacher, that young person said, the reason why I'm doing that is I don't know if I will end up going home. That's where we are. And so I want to stress to my friends at BPS, yeah, this is the current policy and procedure right now, but what we do here is we make laws. And it should be the law of the land in the city of Boston that we ensure that people are protected when they're in the buildings that we are responsible for in the city of Boston. And in addition, government is about confidence. And if people don't have confidence, we can say whatever we want. But if the parents and the young people do not have confidence in folks being able to go in and out of the buildings without ICE approaching them, then you know what? What we will see is what we've seen in many other places, is folks end up fading to black, not taking part in the community, and also not taking part in schools. Every young person in the city of Boston and in the state of Massachusetts should be in school. We are a Commonwealth of Massachusetts that guaranteed public education since 1780, and it's not going to stop now. And so I think it is absolutely critical that we stand up to the pledge that we give every single week when we're in this body, And when we stand up and put our hands over our heart, the last utterance of the Pledge of Allegiance says, with liberty and justice for all. It doesn't say you had to be documented. It said for all. And so that's what we stand for today, and that's what this is about. And I look forward to a robust hearing, and I also look forward to support from my colleagues in aligning the city of Boston with what Maura Healey has done at the state. And we are simply placing our city in absolute alignment with our Attorney General and stepping up for the people who matter most in the schools, which is our young people. Thank you so much, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Chair recognizes Councilor Tito Jackson. Zakem?
Councilor Zakem. That was Councilor Jackson.
Councilor Jackson.
We
Chair
often get
recognizes-
confused.
Yeah, we look very similar. As you can see us side
Chair
by
recognizes
side.
City Council.
Thank
I was
you, Mr.
actually
Chair.
in the process of trying to say we should do silent applause. Didn't want to interrupt the flow, but and we've also been joined by our colleague, City Council Matt O'Malley. Chair recognizes City Council
Thank you,
George Zakem.
Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, Councilor Jackson, not only for bringing this important measure forward, but for your commitment and your partnership on issues of civil rights and justice, particularly with regards to our immigrant community in the city of Boston. At least long before I've been on this body, but our partnership over the years here, I think, has been very fruitful. I think it's an incredibly important discussion to be having. We are at a time right now where our city, once again, is in a position to lead on issues of civil rights and justice. We have done that even before the new administration took office in Washington. We need to continue doing that. I think at a time when people are seeking to divide us, to divide Americans, to pit us against each other, to tread on the most vulnerable, to exclude people, to look at superficial differences and try to drum up support and to attack, going to people's sort of lowest common denominator, their basest instincts of exclusion and solidarity. We need to stand together. I think this is an incredibly important policy to have in place. I'm interested in looking to hear what the Boston Public Schools' current policy is, what our trainings are around for teachers and principals, and making sure that we are very clear that not only does the Boston Police Department not enforce federal immigration law, but that none of the entities or organs of city government here are going to do that. I think we recently, I'm sure many of you were following the Safe Communities Act being discussed at the State House. That's something that needs to happen. We have not only a president who I think was actively trying to divide us on this issue and to discriminate and talking in language that we have not heard in generations here in the United States of America. We also right now have legislation at the state that we have a governor that is opposed to legislation like this. And we need to act and we need to lead here in Massachusetts. So I think it's important that we do this thoughtfully and make sure that whatever we are doing is both we're able to do under state and federal law, but also that we are providing the resources to the teachers, to the students, to the parents, to the administrators who at the end of the day are going to possibly be in the very uncomfortable and possibly in some legal jeopardy when they are facing off with federal immigration agents. I want to make sure we are supporting them and not just making the policy here without that backup, without that training. We have a long history of this sort of work in Massachusetts and in Boston, from the days of the American Revolution to the Fugitive Slave Acts of the 1850s, and to this very day. We need to continue this work. So thank you, Councilor Jackson, for bringing this forward. I look forward to hearing from our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zakem, and we're going to get right into it. So I can see Alejandra Sanquian, if you could come down, and Francis Esparza is here as well. If you can make your way down. We're going to have three panels. Just ask that the panel members stick around to hear each other, and then we're going to get into public testimony. So you can come down this way. Very good. So, sure. So there's an interpreter here that has some volume. We're experiencing some volume issues. So would you prefer, sir? Would you prefer to come down? Would you be able to hear better on the floor? We'll work with our technicians here.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. How are you? How you doing? Welcome. Good to see you.
You want
So-
to the speaker there.
And then-
That's more comfortable.
Look like the 14th City Council. We better watch out. So, good afternoon, both Francis and Alejandro. Good to see you both. I guess I can start with you. If you can start with opening statements, and then we'll get into a little Q&A.
Sure, absolutely. So good afternoon, committee chair, co-chair, and members. My name is Alejandra Senkieng, and I am testifying in my capacity as the director of the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement for the City of Boston. In my role, I work to implement Mayor Walsh's vision of facilitating opportunities for immigrant residents to advance their lives in our city, going beyond working to help them feel welcomed. Boston is a proud city of immigrants. 28% of our residents were born in another country, and they are an integral and cherished members of our community. In addition, nearly 50% of all youth ages 0 to 17 have at least one foreign-born parent. We believe that our city is stronger and healthier when all of the people who live, work, and go to school in it feel that they are indeed integral and cherished members of our community. Therefore, we work to develop more equitable policies and practices. We work to engage immigrant residents so that they have a voice in our city, so that they feel welcomed and safe, so that they have a sense of belonging to our city. In August 2014, Mayor Walsh signed the Boston Trust Act into effect, an ordinance which passed with unanimous vote in this Boston City Council. Under our Trust Act, Boston Police cannot and will not detain an individual for immigration purposes solely on the basis of a civil detainer request, if the individual has otherwise been released from custody. Furthermore, Mayor Walsh has made a commitment that Boston police officers will not become deputized as immigrant enforcement officials. In Boston, we know that by allowing our law enforcement officials to focus on public safety rather than immigration enforcement, we better utilize our human and financial resources. Moreover, standing with and for our immigrant residents has been and will continue to be a crucial issue of morals and values for Mayor Walsh and his administration. For those reasons, we are proud to work closely with the Boston Public Schools on policies to protect the rights of all immigrant students and families, regardless of immigration status. Dr. Esparza will speak to those specific efforts and policies in greater detail. We do believe that if the council moves forward on this proposal, important revisions would be needed to provide additional clarity for the school administrators, staff, and volunteers who will be implementing the policy. In 2014, we engaged in a similar dialogue with the City Council leading up to the passage of our Boston Trust Act to ensure that our policy adequately satisfied the needs and concerns of many stakeholders. We look forward to participating in similar discussions led by this committee as you consider feedback on this ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alejandra. Good to see you. And Francis Esparza, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee chair, co-chair, and members. My name is Francis Esparza. I'm the assistant superintendent for the Office of English Language Learners in Boston Public Schools. Our vision is to provide culturally and linguistically responsive education to our students, all students, not just a certain group of students, with the supports needed to ensure equitable access to providing them opportunities that promote language acquisition, bilingualism, biliteracy, and lifelong learning. In order to provide this equitable access to our students, we are committed to providing safe, healthy, and welcoming spaces that ensure that students are able to focus on their learning while being confident that we will protect them with their constitutional right to free public education, which includes that our students and families receive the necessary information to be able to participate in the Boston Public Schools community without fear or concerns of safety. Working in collaboration with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, the Political Asylum Immigration Representation Office, the Boston Teachers Union, we have assisted in providing access to Know Your Rights workshops for schools in the district. Several presentations are currently being offered in Spanish or offered with interpretation supports in their languages such as Cape Verdean and Haitian Creole. In an effort to reaffirm our support for immigrant students and families and to embrace their diverse cultural backgrounds, we developed a website appropriately titled BPS, We Dream Together. Our website is a collection of resources from various BPS departments as well as from nonprofit organizations. This website serves as a centralized digital hub for immigrant families, students, and educators to identify assistance, toolkits, lesson plans, access to higher education opportunities, and strategies for educators to have courageous conversations with children around the political climate that we live in today. As a way to support our staff, throughout the year, we have partnered with the Office of Social Emotional Learning and Wellness within BPS by offering professional development for educators working with students that may suffer through trauma, due in part to the fear they may be experiencing. Just last month, attorney Jessica Chico and Dr. Kalina Brabeck presented their research on the psychosocial effects of growing up or having a parent deported to over 150 BPS teachers that work with English language learners. We continue to work with them to support teachers with materials to develop classrooms that are more welcoming to our students and families. Collectively, our English language learners and all students represent over 100 different countries and speak 70 different languages, constituting one of the greatest assets within Boston Public Schools. We are proud to work under the leadership of Dr. Chang to support BPS in implementing an inclusive, rigorous, and culturally linguistically sustaining instructional program that nurtures the personal identity of our students and ensures that each student is on the best path to success. It is our intention to continue to work with the Mayor's Office and with the City of Boston and this committee to offer further opportunities to our BPS students and families so that they may continue to make significant and impactful contributions to the diversity of the City of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to start off the question. I want to sort of just take a look at some legal issues as well as jurisdictional issues, if there are any. So you have taken a look at the ordinance docket 0760. Any thoughts or concerns around any legal issues and or any jurisdictional issues?
So those issues, I know that we've been in conversation with Corporation Counsel, and there have been some concerns. We prefer that those be brought up by them. Neither of us are lawyers, so I think it wouldn't be right for us to comment. But there has been a few issues that have been brought up that I think could be resolved in a working session.
Okay. What policies does either the school department or the school committee have regarding the collection of information regarding one's immigration status right now?
What we have put together and updated it, and we've been working on it, and we have had a few updates since February, Educational Access for All. It's a superintendent circular for our school leaders so that our school leaders and teachers are aware of protocols and processes.
Okay.
So we have this available if you need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
according to
go
FERPA, well, no, not according to FERPA, just internal policies, BPS does not ask for immigration status of students.
okay. And to the best of your knowledge, have there ever been any instance where ICE has requested the assistance of the Boston Public Schools or have shown up at a particular school site to carry out an enforcement action on a Boston Public School student or faculty
Not to my
that
knowledge.
you're aware of? All right.
Not to mind, I think under the Trump's executive order on increased ICE activity, then there has been a lot happening in the past 6 months that hasn't happened prior, but that hasn't extended to the Boston Public Schools.
Gotcha. And so activity in terms of just stuff
It's
nationally
like
or
ICE
regionally?
going to courthouses, picking up domestic violence victims, picking up people who go to who are going to USCIS to for an appointment on their waiver in order to become citizens. So they've been entering in spaces that they don't normally enter. That has not been the case in Boston. But I think the fear that comes from our families and our students is very much related to a very much increased activity in ICE. According to their own statistics, they have arrested more than 4 times more the number of people with non-criminal records than this time last year.
Okay. But to date, none of that activity has occurred in and
No.
around the Boston Public Schools.
Not that
Illinois.
I'm aware.
Right. One recently you probably had referenced or may or may not be aware of, there was a court issue where they had showed up, but I think the probation department was keeping ICE from obtaining the necessary information. So we're curious to see sort of what flows from that.
Yeah.
Jurisdictionally, I guess, from an obstruction standpoint, but we haven't had those instances. But if that were to happen, as it stands right now, BPS is prepared to push back and to prevent that type of activity from taking place on school ground.
So we have, yes, within the circular, the different processes and protocols.
Okay.
If federal agencies were to appear.
Councilor Jackson?
Thank you so much, and I want to thank both of you for the work that you do. So I guess the couple pieces I do want to note: the Office of Social Emotional that covers that was cut last year, and so from a baseline perspective, before Donald Trump was actually president, and before these policies actually were put forward, we actually cut that budget, and so now, from a baseline of last year, now with the need that we know that 50% of folks have a parent. Because we need to understand, this not only affects folks who are undocumented, young people in schools are part of a school community. And it would be just as traumatic for those who are their friends and loved ones in that school environment. But we don't have the supports that we had last year to even support those folks who we know have a heightened level of fear and anxiety now. And so I guess one of the things I also want to note, I want to thank the young people of St. Stephen's who actually noted to us that the website was inefficient and that the website and the initial website that you had that dealt with these issues actually was all in English and didn't actually, is that not true?
That's not true.
The web page
So-
that was there? Because what I know has happened now is there's a new website, and I want to thank you for the new website.
It's in
But there-
15 languages.
Yes, but I'm saying the new website is in 15 languages. And I want to credit the young people who brought it to our attention that the information that was previously on the website was several clicks down and actually didn't have the language access that you have now. And that's a compliment to the school department. But I want to ask, how many school leaders have been trained on the procedures and policies that BPS currently has?
So there has been conversation with school leaders, but this circular is still in draft form because it has been updated. The new protocols that are here are going to be presented to school leaders throughout this summer.
Okay. But the issue is if ICE were to, so I guess my question still remains, how many school leaders of the over 120 schools that we have been trained in the current BPS policy that we have relative to ICE entering a school?
All school leaders have had the opportunity to receive the memo. There was a circular, actual training to happen at the school. There has not been trainings at the school. There has been professional developments for school leaders at the bowling building, but every single school leader has been attuned to the circular.
And in an area that you guys train all the time, and you do, and that's what education is all about. It is absolutely critical that all over 120 school leaders actually have training in what is actually on the book right now today. And that also means teachers as well as staff members, in particular folks on the janitorial staff, who could actually have this interaction with ICE, right? And so I think that is absolutely critical. I guess I would ask Alejandra, and I know you aren't going to speak to the components around the legal aspects of this, but have you heard of any ICE interactions in or around a school nationally through the networks that you are connected with?
What we have heard of is increased ICE activity as parents are dropping off their students.
Okay.
Outside the distance, outside, it's ICE's own policy that they don't enter schools or school grounds. So we have heard of instances of that.
Yep. And after those incidences, was there an increase or decrease in attendance? Do you know if there was?
There have been significant decreases in attendance when there's activity either by ICE or sometimes even not by ICE, but because of the fear and sort of the heightened alertness. There have been incidences where other agencies, for example, USCIS, United States immigration and customs have gone, in a school, and they're, not ICE, but that was a huge concern. And that wasn't here though. That was in New York.
Yeah. And I think, but to your point and to our chair's question earlier, whether or not they have, the fear is there. And by the way, Massachusetts, I know oftentimes we think we're a bubble unto ourselves, but we're not. And these federal agents actually don't necessarily abide by the same rules that we do. Are there in this? I'd like to hear what the policy is currently in the city of Boston and how it compares to what we have in front of us. Because I want to let you know, and again, I want to thank the young people who are from St. Stephen's. What we basically did, and in school we might call it plagiarism, but we actually took a lot of the policy that you currently have and actually put it forward and to codify it as law. So can you make any comparison or clarification from what you currently, what's the current policy and procedure for the Boston Public Schools versus what we have in front of us?
Yeah, and there's a series of procedures and protocols. I can give you a copy of it. It would be too much for me to explain to you. I have a few copies here for you.
Okay. But I wanted to understand what is it? Do you currently is ICE allowed in a school building? If ICE knocks on a school door, are they allowed to come in and say that I'm looking for Matt O'Malley, and would they be turned over?
Okay, I'll read some of it to you.
Okay.
So if a law enforcement agent presents itself at a school and requests access to a student, politely inform the law enforcement agent that BPS has a process regarding such requests, that those requests must be handled accordingly to the following steps. Immediately advise your assigned Boston Public School officer and call BPS Department of Safety, that gives the phone number, to request assistance in working with the law enforcement agent. BPS Safety Services will contact BPD. Number 2, call the BPS Office of Legal Advisor. It gives a phone number for immediate review of the warrant, subpoena, or court order to ensure that it is lawfully issued, and for the further legal guidance. If necessary, the legal advisor will determine whether BPS is required to respond or comply and notify the superintendent's office. Number 3, all law enforcement agents must clearly identify themselves and the purpose of their visit. The school administrator in charge should request the following from the agent: name, badge number of the agent, the purpose of the visit, whether they have a warrant, and any other documentation to support the purpose of the agent's visit to the school.
Okay. I'll be honest with you. That doesn't sound like we're protecting that young person, and that's why we're here today. And also, and I want to acknowledge the leadership that has happened in the city and the leadership of Mayor Walsh. But when we call ourselves a sanctuary city, I call ourselves a sanctuary city, and I believe that we should be stepping up as a sanctuary, and our sanctuary should be in our schools. And that's one of the things that to me doesn't sound like we're going to protect that young person. We're going to ensure that they are not turned over to a federal agent. I'm going to actually hand the mic back to the chair so I can ensure that my colleagues get an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. We've also been joined by my colleague, City Councilor Anissa Asabi George. Chair recognizes City Councilor Josh Zakem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here and for your work every day. I guess my question, it's been somewhat addressed on the current policy, is, and I think Christine is getting us copies of it. Thank you. Is, I guess, in the general spirit of things, without parsing the language, without getting into legal niceties here, what's your understanding? Is that if, according to the current policy, we're not allowing people to enter, it says, without a warrant or subpoena or judicial order, right? That's what you just read.
That's what I just read.
Is that both of your general understanding? Is that whether it's the Boston Police, the FBI, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, if they don't have a warrant, or obviously, I mean, if there's a 911 call, obviously you want the Boston police to come in as soon as possible. But absent an emergency, where our BPS policy is any law enforcement officer needs to have a warrant or other judicial order to come in and enter the schools.
Yes.
I think that's great. I think going back to what we were talking about is that, providing training is incredibly important. I think it's a lot to ask of whether it's, a teacher, whether it's a school secretary, whether it's a vice principal, whether it's the principal, whether whoever it is, to say to, armed and uniformed law enforcement officers, you can't come in here. I think that requires some serious training, probably some role playing. I mean, I know there are people who are much better at this than I, but I would want to see that happen, I think, as soon as possible. Obviously, we're at the end of this school year, but if anything, we've seen the rhetoric and the activity ramped up. I know Alejandra mentioned that ICE has had a policy of not going into schools. I mean, President Trump's Homeland Security Secretary has issued new guidance that sort of wipes away I think it was a sensitive locations policy that they had. So, I mean, we, unfortunately, like much of what we're doing in this chamber these days around the budget and everything else, we have to defend against a hostile federal government. And doing what we can is important. Now, obviously, we can't do everything in our system of government. They have a lot of authority, but what we can do is make sure that our employees and our public school professionals are as prepared as possible for this. What can you talk about the training or planning for that?
In August, principals attend August Leadership Institute called ALI, and there will be an actual training for all principals, all new onboarding principals, as well as assistant principals coming on to have the training in regards to the circular, as well as the Know Your Rights training. We're bringing in different organizations to be able to support with those trainings. Teacher conferences will also be happening. They're mostly instructional, but we will be providing a Know Your Rights training for teachers. We're also working with the community-based organizations throughout Boston, those that support our Spanish-speaking families, those that support our Haitian families, our Cape Verdean families, our Vietnamese families, all bringing them together to be a part of our teachers conference so that they can also get the different trainings, not just on instruction, but on all of this material too.
Right. And I think just as importantly, and Alejandra mentioned the Trust Act that we worked on a few years ago, is making sure people know about these policies, making sure families and students know that school is a safe place for them, or we're making it as safe as we can, because, we're investing a lot of our time, our energy, our resources into the Boston public school system, into our nearly 60,000 students. Regardless of their status, immigration-wise, regardless of what their language status is, we are, as a city, as a society, we've decided that is worthwhile. That is something we want to do. We want to make sure we're providing the best environment possible. And if someone's sitting there nervous every day, or even once a month, that's a big loss, and that's a day of learning that our students aren't going to get back. So I don't know what we can do, and I realize there is a lot of fear, a lot of misinformation out in our communities right now, but whatever can be done. I mean, I think we can always look to improve and make things stronger and better, but even given the current policy, I think people really need to get that word, whether that's in registration materials at the beginning of the year, whether it's at an end of the year. I mean, I don't have children in the public schools yet, so I don't know how much communication goes out, but I know it's pretty regular. But just making sure families are aware of that, I think, is almost as important as how strong the policy is. And can you talk a little bit about if there are plans for that, or what's being done on the
for communication? And this was actually brought up last week when we met. Alejandra and I met with St. Stephen's, also to talk about what are our next steps. So providing families with communication, not just written communication, a robocall that they can get resources from, not just the website. Students also have access to their BPS email, where we'll be putting out information to them, as well as working with our Boston Student Advisory Council, who has created an app and putting that information up on their app, and just trying to put out as much information. And, people are going to say we're going to over communicate, but that's the only way that we can get to everyone, because not everyone will go to the website. Right. Not everyone will open, their mail. So we want to make sure that we plaster it throughout the entire city to put the word out on what's going on in Boston Public Schools to support.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Councilor Nisa Sabi George. Any questions of this panel? This time?
No, thank you. I don't have any. I just am here to offer my support and certainly learn more. Thank you. And have a better understanding of what this could mean for our kids in the city. I also do want to, at some point, I'm going to have to sneak out. We've got playoff soccer, so I can't miss that. Thank you. But thank you for being here. What I do miss, I will watch online. Thank you.
She's referring to her children's soccer team, so it's...
Yes, not my own soccer. Thank you.
So that will conclude. Thank you, Francis and Alejandra. That will
you.
conclude the first panel. Ask that you stick around. We have two other panels, and we have public testimony. And some students have come here, and I think they would appreciate you listening to what they have to say. So
And just, and just to emphasize, we're here to hear and learn and listen from everyone who's giving testimony today.
thank you. That's very helpful. Chair recognizes
I just
Councilor
want to note, if Corporation Counsel has an issue with what we're bringing forward, we would encourage them to attend the hearing, so we can expedite this. I realize that, but because the real issue here is that there are young people who every single day and families every single day who are dealing with anxiety and stress. We don't even have a nurse in every single school to deal with the anxiety that we have over these issues. So dragging it out, and understand, the reason why we're here is because the Boston School Committee did not codify this. That's why we're here today. And so we are, as the body, to me, one of the most important roles that we can do here is to protect young people who are in the city of Boston. And they feel, and their families feel, and their feelings are valid, that they're feeling unprotected and vulnerable. And so for me, as a legislator, it's important that we get the law right. But most importantly, how do we have schools without young people? And I can guarantee you people cannot learn if they're in trauma. They can't learn while they're scared. And we know this.
Right.
And so what we need to do is do all that we can do to show the broadest level of respect and support for folks. And we make laws. That's what we do here. And I believe if your policy is in alignment with the policy that I've put forward, that we need to go forward and codify that, so we show the families and we show to the city and we show to the nation that Boston leads in how we treat our young people, documented and undocumented. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Thank you both. Second panel, if I could call upon Matt Allen, Liza Ryan, Claudia Martinez, Rebecca Mulligan, and Maya Taft Morales. And there's 5 seats right across the front here. If you would all be kind enough to come down and join us. Again, Matt Allen, Liza Ryan, Claudia Martinez, Rebecca Mulligan, Maya Taft Morales. Who wants to start? Gotcha. So Matt? Yeah. Matt, you'd like to start? So welcome, Matt. If you could just state your name and affiliation for the record, and then you have the floor to give us your thoughts on this ordinance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Matt Allen. I'm the field director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. I want to thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for leading this session, and the other committee members for attending, and Councilor Jackson for introducing this important ordinance. Here to speak in support of the ordinance, both from practical and symbolic reasons. It's needed because, as you know, and as we've heard, undocumented students are more likely to be targets of immigration enforcement than ever before, given that the Trump administration has increased ICE and Homeland Security agents from 5,000 to 15,000 over the last few months, and expanded discretion for individual agents to determine who they're going to go after for deportation, which is a change in undoing the set of priorities that focus on people with criminal records in the past. So now anyone who doesn't have full legal status is vulnerable, even those who have applied or in the process of applying to become residents. Trump's new targets could include students, and so far, ICE has stayed away from schools, but that doesn't mean that that's not going to change. The Boston City Council, of course, can't stop immigration enforcement, but can ensure that Boston public school facilities are as safe as possible by setting up clear and predictable policies about how to interact with ICE agents and when they should be granted entry. This will reassure immigrant parents so they don't keep their students away from school. And it should be also supported, in our view, as a stand against the xenophobia and racism that seem to be underpinning Trump's immigration policy, which is an approach that attempts to cast all immigrants as dangerous criminals in an effort to increase public support for this deportation machine. And this rhetoric contributes to a hostile environment. As we heard, it creates fear, which makes learning difficult. There was a recent survey of 50,000 teens that found that 80% said they had witnessed bullying or harassment since the 2016 election, and half of these incidents were motivated by immigration status, 80% motivated by race or ethnicity. So, in short, every student should feel safe and welcome in our schools, regardless of race, color, and immigration status. As we heard from the school representatives, there may be some policies in place right now that do address these issues, but we'd agree 100% with Councilor Jackson that policies that are internal to the Boston Public Schools could be changed at the drop of a hat with a movement from the school committee, a change in administration, a change in the superintendent. So it would be helpful for the Boston City Council to put these policies into law to ensure that they're going to be permanent. Finally, I just want to note that this ordinance is completely consistent with the Attorney General's recommendation on the subject. She released a memo called Rights and Obligations of Schools in response to ICE requests for access or data or information, and this policy comports with that. So Boston City Council will be taking a clear stand against bullying, discrimination, and fear by supporting this ordinance, and doing so also be demonstrating that in Boston we're motivated by our values, not our fears. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Should we go right down the line? Right, good. Welcome. Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Mulligan, and I
Rebecca.
teach English to speakers of other languages at Brighton High School. Most of my students have arrived in the United States within the last 2 years. Together, they represent 11 different countries and speak even more languages. Many of my students moved to the U.S. in search of safety from war, gang violence, poverty, and more. As a teacher, I prioritize creating a space where students experience the security they sacrifice so much to reach. My students have a right to this safety just as they have a right to education. And when a student does not feel safe, as has been mentioned earlier, they cannot learn as effectively, sometimes not at all. As hard as I work to facilitate my students' ability to let their guard down and engage fully in learning, there are naturally limits to how much I can protect my students. My school community regularly performs fire drills and shelter-in-place drills to prepare for those moments that are out of our control. However, one of the main concerns right now for many of my students is not fire, but whether they and their families are safe from deportation. I have not been prepared by my school to ensure their safety in this regard. At this time in U.S. history, my students are not feeling the sense of security they deserve. The day after the presidential elections, I came into school to a classroom of tearful and fear-filled students who were uncertain about their chances of staying united with their families. The worry is still so present. Recently, when asked to utilize the new vocabulary word concerned, several of my students wrote example sentences saying that they are concerned for their futures. Other students have asked me directly, what would happen if ICE came to the school to deport them, and what I can do to protect them. I would like to be able to tell them that they will be guarded from interactions with ICE when they are in my care. I would like to be able to tell them, as it says in this proposed ordinance for sanctuary schools, that ICE will not be allowed to enter any BPS site or interact with our students or families during transportation to and from school or on field trips, except with a signed warrant from a judge and explicit written permission from BPS superintendent and the Suffolk County District Attorney. I would also like for them to receive this same answer from anyone they ask in the school, which would require myself and all of my colleagues working in Boston schools in any capacity to be educated on the protocol for if ICE arrives at a school. Our students are the lifeblood of our schools. Our allegiance should be with them, not with ICE. Not with ICE, even through inadvertent cooperation, such as collecting data that puts our student at risk. I thank you for your time today, and I urge you to pass this ordinance that takes a more proactive stance, saying that we are here for our students, that says we commit to making sure our students are also here to stay, and that we will do everything within our legal right to make those promises true. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. If you could state your name and affiliation for the record.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Maya Taft Morales. I'm a Boston Public School teacher as well. I teach 4th grade at the Donald McKay School in the vibrant immigrant community of East Boston. I'm also a member of the Boston Teachers Union, the immigrant rights group known as Unafraid Educators. As teachers and other advocates have testified and will continue to testify, this country's anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies are having devastating impacts on the lives of everyone living in and beyond this country, those who cannot escape dangerous situations and seek refuge in our country, those whose livelihoods and families are now under threat daily in our city, and the majority of American population who have always benefited from having and accepting undocumented immigrants in this country. From my experience as a teacher, I am confident that if Boston Public Schools became sanctuary schools, our students and communities would immediately show improved health, mental and physical, academic achievement, and community involvement, not to mention the entire culture shift that I know we would see towards the vision of a more welcoming schools that we all share. But this ordinance is even more than that to me and to many of us. This ordinance is an opportunity to shape the direction in which our country and our world moves. I do not have a history or a law degree, but I do teach a little bit of everything, as teachers do. And discussing our nation's history with my students has strengthened my resolve to advocate for sanctuary schools. I believe that one of the most important vocabulary words I've taught my students is the word criminalize. My 4th graders take this word apart and understand it to mean making someone a criminal. And as far back as history goes, human beings have been criminalized in this country. Our nation was built on the backs of legally enslaved people. After the Civil War, vagrancy laws, Jim Crow laws legally perpetuated the criminalization of Black and brown people. And as we speak here today, the criminalization of Black people and other people of color runs strong through our nation's blood. And the current administration is making more laws that systematically criminalize immigrants, forcing unimaginable quantities of people innocent of posing any legitimate threat to our country into the criminal justice and immigration enforcement system, which is designed to earn private profits at their and at our expense. The heroes that we celebrate in our school, Harriet Tubman, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Dolores Huerta, they did not accept unjust laws like the ones we are being asked to accept right now. They refused to comply and were unafraid to face the consequences of doing so. They tirelessly advocated for laws that would create a more just society. And now it is time for us, and you all, our city leaders, to do this too. Many opponents of sanctuary cities and districts point to the law, saying our undocumented residents have broken the law. It's as simple as that. But we all know that the law is not always fair and that it's not that simple. Our nation has contributed to devastating violence and corruption that continues to plague Latin America, yet we have not made amends for damage done. We have demanded low-wage labor to pick our crops, to clean our homes, and enabled our farms to depend on undocumented workers, and we have not granted those workers the liberties and securities they deserve. This is simply the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding why we have so many undocumented people in the first place here in this country. But what I hope that we all understand is that it is naive and very dangerous to blame undocumented people for their own position. No one wants to leave everything they know if they have any other choice. Our country must treat the people who have been affected by our international and our domestic policies with compassion and with reason. And that is why I urge us all to pass this ordinance. This ordinance says that BPS will not participate in the criminalization of our children and our families. We will not blame our families for the violence from which they sought refuge. This ordinance makes clear that our educators will serve all of our students with compassion and respect. Right now, serving our undocumented students, which is our legal and moral obligation, means protecting them and their information. Our community and our country are looking to us to be the leaders of this greater fight for human rights. This ordinance is our opportunity to do so, and it's time for Boston Public Schools to be sanctuary schools. Thank you very much for hearing what I had to say, and if you would like to discuss any part of this further, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Maya. We're going to keep moving on down. Please just introduce yourself and any affiliation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us here. My name is Claudia Martinez, and I am the chair of the Boston Teacher Union's Immigrant Rights Committee, Unafraid Educators. I am also a guidance counselor at Boston Latin Academy. We choose to be unafraid because our undocumented students and families cannot. They live in fear every day. Fear of deportations, brutal separation, and incarceration. Just like everyone here, I can tell you hundreds of stories of undocumented young people fearing for their fate and that of their families, of youth that come to me for answers that I do not have, and of families that ask me how to keep their children safe, and all I have is silence. But instead, I will tell you that you need to take a stand. Calling BPS a sanctuary district is more powerful than saying we're building safe spaces for youth and their families, or everyone is welcome here. Sanctuary schools have become a symbol of safety for immigrant families across the United States. BPS has taken many steps to support our immigrant families and undocumented students, but it has not called itself a sanctuary. And when we refuse to call ourselves a sanctuary district, we're sending a clear message that we lack the courage to take a stand for our most vulnerable students. We have to say it, and we have to call it what it is. Making the Boston Public Schools a sanctuary district means making a public contract and commitment with all immigrant and undocumented families that we will protect, cherish, celebrate, and support them. Many of us have already made this commitment, and we live it and reaffirm it every day. Because as unafraid educators, we have been building sanctuary schools from the ground up, and we will continue to do so. But the leadership of our city and our schools need to join us and take a stand. Being a sanctuary district means committing to training our staff on the rights of immigrant and undocumented students and on the protocols, making it very difficult for ICE to have access to any of our students by requiring a warrant signed by a judge and explicit permission from the superintendent and the district attorney. As recently as a month ago, ICE agents came to a school in Queens and asked about a student within that school. Thankfully, whoever was at the front desk knew to turn them away because the warrant wasn't signed by a judge. I don't know that that would be the same case if it happened here. Also, that we will never collect immigration status information for any of our students, and that we will provide this information to our families. The reality is that we cannot change people's immigration status. We cannot magically create a path to citizenship, which means we cannot change their circumstances. But we can make our schools safe havens so that our young people feel safe and can learn, because this isn't really about education. This isn't really about immigration. This is about education. It is about human rights, because when a young person is afraid of deportation for themselves or their family, they cannot learn, they cannot thrive, they cannot dream. The BTU's Unafraid Educators were the first in the district to sponsor a week of action in support of undocumented students. We were the first to bring in SIM, the student immigrant movement, to provide trainings to students, teachers, and guidance counselors. And we led the charge in creating a public website for our district with immigration resources and information on college access for undocumented students. And we were the first in BPS to take a public stand on behalf of our undocumented students and families. And now we invite you, the leadership of our city and of our public schools, to join us in being unafraid.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Liza Ryan, and it is my honor to submit testimony today in favor of the ordinance on behalf of the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, MIRA. MIRA is the largest immigrant advocacy organization in New England and maintains 130 immigrant-led and serving organizational members across the Commonwealth. Having served the more than 1.1 million foreign-born individuals in our state and their children for over 30 years, MIRA is uniquely qualified to give testimony as to the impact our current federal administration has had on the population and the resulting impact on students, foreign-born and native. In all of our time serving the community through legislative and administrative advocacy, we have never witnessed a period of such acute and justified fear in the community. Beginning on November 8th, we received hundreds of calls from across the state from concerned individuals wanting to know what might happen to themselves and their family. Truth be told, we didn't know what to tell them. We ourselves were unsure of what was to come. But with detention of non-criminal undocumented individuals has more than doubled, it is clear that the president is making good on his claim to deport millions of hardworking residents. The administration's lack of priorities for deportation has thrown entire neighborhoods in Boston into sheer chaos. This was demonstrated on February 23, 2017, when TSA agents were at the State Street stop on the Orange Line. The mere presence of unidentifiable law enforcement was enough to keep students out of school and families from traveling in the city. In Brockton, rumors of a raid by Immigration and Customs Enforcement resulted in more than 50% absenteeism in some elementary school classes, as cited by the New York Times article. Since the year 2000, more than a quarter of Boston residents are immigrants, and a total of 25% or more of all Massachusetts students are immigrants or have at least one foreign-born parent. This is not an issue that is impacting just California or Texas. This is our issue, our problem. These are our students and their parents. And the many terrifying stories that we have heard, from wage theft to increases of unreported crime, including sexual assault and domestic violence against children, the most heartbreaking results of the administration's xenophobic deportation agenda is the impact it is having on our youngest residents. Shortly after the election, I spoke to a friend who lives in East Boston. She mentioned that her 5-year-old niece began packing her stuffed animals into her small backpack. When her father asked her what she was doing, she responded, "Well, we have to leave, right, Papa? They don't want us here anymore." This little girl has never known any country but this one, and yet, even in our Commonwealth, she has picked up the message that she isn't wanted here. It would be one thing if this was just rhetoric. As an advocacy organization, we could organize community meetings and inform our constituency that they had no reason to fear. That, however, is not the truth. They have every reason to fear. While ICE has not yet entered a school asking for information on a student, they have consistently tested the boundaries of the so-called sensitive locations memo, a piece of policy that designates school, places of worship, hospitals, rallies, and courthouses as no-go zones. ICE has repeatedly apprehended parents of students after they drop off their children at school, waiting around the corner and loitering near school properties. They have also detained individuals across the street from a church where 2 men were using the shelter, and outside a courthouse where a woman was pursuing a restraining order against her abuser, and then her abuser reported her to ICE. It is therefore critical for the Boston Public School District to review and expand its protocol for ICE interaction to reflect the real and present possibility that ICE may in fact seek to detain and deport one of its students. It is our recommendation that this committee support the adoption of an ordinance that would maintain education for all administrators on the appropriate protocol, train BPS teachers in basic Know Your Rights education, that they may extend appropriate non-legal advice to their students, inform all parents in the district in the appropriate language of their rights and the protocol of the school, and bring the Boston Public Schools protocol in line with the most thorough policies nationwide. These are uncommon times that have had uncommon impact on our students. A recent report by Human Impact Partners on immigration states that anxiety over deportation and discrimination has caused almost 3/4 of children under 18 with undocumented parents to experience symptoms of PTSD and severe anxiety. From surveys of undocumented parents, 29% report that their children have been afraid most of the time. We do not have the luxury of waiting to see what will happen. We know what has happened. Discriminatory and divisive language has turned into draconian and debilitating policy that paralyzes our communities and terrifies our children. Now, instead of learning math and science, they are learning that their rights are not as important as those of their neighbors. We may not be able to change the actions of the federal administration, but here in Boston, the home to the 5th largest immigrant population in America, we can do everything in our power to make it safe for our children to learn. We ask that you consider this favorably.
Thank you, Liza. Appreciate your testimony, as well as the testimony of the entire panel. I've also been joined by my colleague, City Councilor Ayanna Presley. I guess the question I have for the teachers, Councilor Jackson had mentioned it to the first panel with respect to attendance and student performance being negatively impacted. So despite the fact that there's been no ICE incident in the Boston Public Schools, despite the fact that we have the Boston policy, plus I think ICE's own policy, I assume that you're seeing some attendance issues, but I really like to know, what are the teachers saying to the students, or what are the schools instructing the students to do or to not do, based on the fact that no incidents have happened from ICE, despite the fact that we have a policy, despite that we're having this meeting today. So maybe to you who teaches at the McKay, so what do you say to your children, and what are other teachers saying to those children?
Yeah, so one big part of the initiative of the Boston Teachers Union group was to have teachers to have that conversation, to start that conversation. I think a lot of us were feeling unsure as to what to say to them, because we want to say you'll be safe, but we couldn't assure that. So a lot of them, we have meetings in the morning, and when it comes up and when the election came up, a lot of it was like, what happens if, and us saying, we're not sure. And that's hard to say to 9-year-olds who are scared. So what we did during the week of May 1st was we had a coming out day where teachers said, I will support you as a teacher, even if you are unafraid, even if you are undocumented. And that was just to get the word out to families and students that we are supporting them. But it's not a tangible ordinance that we have in place, and it's not a training. At our school, we also did some work on having those conversations with our principal and trying to understand what the rules are. I think another aspect is not just students' anxiety, but families. I think families are pulling back from getting involved in schools and avoiding systems that come from the government in general, because they are worried that that's going to wind up putting them in a dangerous position. So we've seen that from parents, and part of the reason we come out and we put signs on our door that say we support undocumented families and students is so that that family can come in during their conference and they can say, part of the situation that I'm dealing with right now is I'm undocumented, and we can help them sort through that without them feeling like we're going to turn them in.
And are we seeing situations where children are chronically absent, and this is the reason why? And how are we addressing that?
In my classroom, I'm not sure I could even say that was why. I'm not sure. I don't know about other schools, if you've noticed that.
But I assume if we had reassuring teachers, so in your instance, you're at the McKay, you got a good handle on things, students are listening to you, they respect you, and there's some confidence and there's some trust building there that they'll show up to your classroom based on the relationship you have with your students. Plus, I assume that they know that we have a mayor and a city council that cares, we have a school district that cares, we have a police department that cares. It's not, I know what you're saying, you can say those words, but I don't know how much solace they take in it.
Yeah, I definitely would say that before we had our coming out day, they did not know that.
Okay.
And it was like, oh, okay. So that was the whole point, is that if you're new to a country and you see people who look different from you, who clearly have different economic statuses from you, these big systems, it's very intimidating. And so the assumption is that they're not there for you until it's very, very explicitly made.
Right.
So I don't think they know that the city is there for them. I think a couple knew.
And my question is designed we want to keep kids on track. We want them to be motivated, and we want them in a safe, encouraging learning environment to not have to worry about, the drama and trauma around them. And I guess what's the best way we can do that? Is it through this ordinance that we have here? Is it through advocacy? Is it through, coming out, counselors coming out to city councils, coming out to area schools and trying to convince folks? So.
I think there's different levels to it. So on the one hand, when students know that we take a stand saying, we're in support of undocumented students, because I know that my students are not going to come and tell me that they're undocumented unless they know that I'm publicly saying that I'm going to support them no matter what. So that's one piece of it. The other piece that is, I think, the harshest and the hardest in supporting undocumented students is battling the hopelessness that they feel. So I work at BLA with a lot of high school students, and I have to battle with them day in and day out. What's the point of me even coming to school if I'm not even going to be able to go to college? And I've seen the two extremes. I've seen some students say, yeah, Boston Public Schools is a sanctuary district, right? And I have to tell them, actually, we are not. We haven't said that publicly. The city has said that, but the Boston Public Schools has not. And they're like, well, if ICE comes here, they're not going to give them my name. And I'm like, well, actually, if they have a warrant, the way that protocols stand now, I think I've had to give that. And then on the other hand, I've had students say, even my school is not willing to say they're going to protect me. So what's the point? In terms of battling hopelessness, I tell my students, yes, it's going to be harder for you. Yes, it's very difficult. And yes, I don't have answers, but I'm here, and I'm going to be here with you day in and day out. And that's what I see really make a difference to my students, that even though I don't have the answers and even though they don't have a path to citizenship to change their circumstances, but that there are adults that are publicly willing to take a stand and to say, I have your back, and to be present every step of the way. So as part of the Unafraid Coming Out Day, it's a poster that then people put up on their offices or on their doors. And so it really changes the culture of a school when you walk around and you see all these posters that say, I stand with undocumented students and families. There's something, because being undocumented, there's so much secrecy around it. There's something really powerful about the public statement coming from others. And so I think if we're really thinking about this population, I think teachers being able to honestly tell their students what schools can do to protect them, city councilors as well, I think as a city saying what can we actually do to protect them, and then whatever advocacy comes along the way around a pathway to citizenship. I have my 15 and 16-year-old 10th graders, young women who are undocumented, and so their plan right now is to try to get married by the time they're 18 so that they can get their papers, because there's no other way that they can get citizenship. And along with that, they can't work, but they take care of their siblings. They take AP classes. They are in after-school programs. They play basketball. And when you ask them why, they say, I have to be a perfect student. I have to be the perfect person so that I can get money to go to college. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to go. So I think that's the third thing, is just a lot of misinformation about whether undocumented students can go to college, because they can. The challenge is just being able to pay for it. So I would say, because of the secrecy of immigration and being undocumented, taking people in power, all of us taking a public stand that we will cherish and protect our students, helping our students battle the hopelessness that they feel because of their circumstances. What was the last thing I said? Oh, and then providing them information on the fact that they can go to college. It's just, we have to be very strategic about how they get there.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Any questions of the panel?
First, I want to thank the Unafraid educators, and I want to thank you for your advocacy. I want to thank the ACLU, and I also want to thank my friends over at Mira for the guidance and the steadfast leadership that you've had in doing this for so many years. The one other piece I would want to say is that, so I want to be clear, and Alejandra, correct me if I'm wrong. I've heard many reports that the administration has said we're not a sanctuary city. That, can you clarify that term? Trust Act and Sanctuary City are two different things, correct? Okay. 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 So just to say that back into the mic, it was just, and I want to be, and the reason why this makes it even more important that we make a clarification that we are a sanctuary school district. I believe that it is my feeling that the Trust Act actually makes us that sanctuary. There's a whole host, and I would love to hear some clarification there. Go ahead.
Yes, and I would defer to the ACLU if they have a better answer to this. Up until very recently, there has been no legal definition of the term sanctuary, but U.S. Attorney General Sessions did define it in one of his more recent memos and clarified that. And he said it was any city or jurisdiction that was in violation of USC 8/1373.
Okay.
So that's a harboring law, and that has to do with information sharing. And to date, there is no city nor ordinance nor the Trust Act ordinance or policies in Chelsea or Cambridge, Somerville that are in any violation of that federal code. So according to Attorney General Sessions' definition, there are no sanctuaries in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Because up until that point in time, there was no legal definition, but the Attorney General has now provided a legal definition, and so therefore we are not.
Okay. What we do want to ensure, well, actually, that's an interesting person and interesting perspective around the definition. But what I would say is that I think it's really critical that we all agree that that young people are the folks that we definitely all should be agreeing on, as well as all those who are undocumented. And I think it's important that we speak the same language. And I think what ends up happening, and I want to thank Councilor Zachem for his foresight in shepherding the Trust Act. And I'm sure you got some of the emails that I got that were not emails that were nice relative to that. But I think we need to be speaking a language that people understand, and people who are from other countries actually understand. And I think that word sanctuary does definitely mean something. Have any of you been trained on what to do if you were walking into the building and an ICE agent approached you?
No.
No.
Some of us have talked about forming like unofficial groups within our schools for how we would defend our students, but I've received no training on it.
And a lot of teachers feel timid about that and feel afraid to take a stand because they don't want to also be in trouble. So a lot of teachers are asking for that very strongly.
Let me just interject that. Just to, Matt, if in the event that someone intervenes like that, what are you seeing either around the state or nationally with respect to folks, again, putting themselves into harm's way, stopping something? Are they in obstruction of justice? Are they being tried?
No, we haven't seen any cases like that. Under the governing Supreme Court case law, it has been found that schools have an obligation to protect students and to make sure that the schools are equally accessible to all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender, and that students within schools have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So under those circumstances, administrators may demand a judicial warrant if law enforcement agents such as ICE want entry. I think it's important to understand that there are two different kind of warrants that come out of ICE, and one is administrative, one is judicial. And I didn't understand that distinction when I heard that passage read by the representatives from the Boston Public Schools. That judicial warrant, according to the policy put forward by Councilor Jackson, would have to be respected. And that's one of the provisions in the policy that ensures that we're not in violation of Section 1373, as well as saying that we would have to share information as required by law. So I think there should be some clarity there, and I don't think that there's anything in the ordinance which would subject school administrators or teachers to obstruction of justice charges or anything like that.
Gotcha.
And I guess the last thing I would say is that we live in a time that we require courageous leadership, and you are what a courageous leadership looks like, and that it's imperative that we resist today, as you are resisting in your classroom, that we resist by legislating compassion, righteousness, and justice in the work that we do. And I want to thank you for using your platform and what you have in your classrooms to do what you're doing. One last piece. What does it feel like to not have an answer? What is that? How does that affect you in your classroom?
It's awful, you know. I think so. The day after the election, I had 4 young women come into my office, and 2 of them undocumented, 2 of them their best friends, and the undocumented ones asked me, "What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my family? Can I get a job? Can I go to college? What am I going to do with my life?" And I didn't know what to say, and so all I could say to them was what I pledged to all of my students, that I will move mountains for them, and that I will go to bat for anything that they need, even if I don't have answers. But I think it brings a level of fear for myself as a professional as well, because I cannot protect my students. You know, if a student tells me that they're homeless, I can call the city, I can call the bowling building, I can call all these different people to try to get them help. But for my undocumented students, I don't know where to go or what else to do than offer them my heart, which is good, but not enough.
Let's say after the elections in November, I did a project-based learning unit around students creating PSAs on knowing their rights and sharing that information with other students in the school through a poster project and learning English through that project. And we found readings on what to do if ICE comes to your home, what to do if you're stopped on the street. And naturally that led to questions of what is my status if they come to school. And that was something that I created this whole project because I wanted my students to be able to protect themselves in any situation. And when it came down to it, the person that they spent every day with who was trying to help them protect themselves was, my hands were tied on how to really fully protect them in the spaces that we shared. And that's not what I want to be able to say. I want them to have signs in my classroom wanting them to feel proud of themselves regardless of their immigration status, and to not be able to show that pride that I have in them for being strong by being able to protect them and be strong alongside them is absolutely heartbreaking and enraging, actually. And I share what Claudia said of after the election, of saying so many questions and not being able to give any answers, and just saying the best we could say is that we'll fight tooth and nail and fight alongside you. And that's, why we're here today. But it's hopefully, next year when we start the year, we'll be able to have that training and that project, and be able to also include what they can know what their situation will be if it also happens in school, which we have seen attempts for in other states not so far away.
And the only thing I would ask through the chair that you request of the Boston Public Schools is an assessment of what the Boston school police are told, because that is something that has not been asked, and I would love an indication of what their direction is relative to this. It bothers me that school leaders haven't been trained. It bothers me that teachers haven't been trained, as well as staff. And I would also love to hear the status of the school police relative to this. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Chair recognizes Councilor Josh Sakem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I have an obligation in the district I have to get to, but I have a couple quick things. I first want to thank the three of you educators, not just for being here and sharing your experience, but for taking on what is an unacceptably heavy burden right now, given what's happening in Washington and around this country. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing with us and the public at large why policies and actions at the city level are necessary to protect our students. It's appreciated and makes a big difference, so thank you. And I want to ask quickly, Liza, I forget if you're also a lawyer. Are you?
I am not.
Okay, so no disrespect. I'm going to ask our attorney on the panel. Counselor Flaherty mentioned this briefly. Talking about what people can do, whether it's as bystander training, or whether it's our public school teachers, whether it's parents, whether it's even students who have legal status. And, I think you were talking about some friends. Obviously, people are in school together. They're going to become friends. No one's asking to see someone's immigration status when they want to hang out or get lunch together. I guess, two aspects. One, have you heard or seen, and this can go to you too, Liza, I guess, around the country, any issues with folks, whether it's being disciplined by an employer, whether it's law enforcement, or other issues when they are saying you can't enter? I mean, it's my understanding that, like any law enforcement agency, ICE needs a judicial warrant to forcibly enter premises if someone doesn't let them in. Can you comment on how, if there's a difference between someone's home and the public school? I guess it's going to be back to Matt, and then sort of broadly, if you've heard about issues like this, any repercussions people are suffering.
First of all, I hate to disappoint you, but for legal and ethical reasons, I have to confess that I'm actually not a lawyer either.
Oh, all right.
Even though I do work at the ACLU.
I guess Michael and I are the only two lawyers here then. All right.
What I can do is refer that question to our legal department and get back to you. Our immigration expert is named Laura Rodlow, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today, but I did confer with her prior to this hearing, and the most helpful thing she did was refer me to the Maura Healy's memo about law enforcement and immigration enforcement in schools. So I'll be sure to get that to the committee. And she also, expressed to me some of the points I already made, that there is a expectation of privacy within schools, and therefore ICE agents, administrators and public school officials can request a warrant that's signed by a judge. But I will also email you directly and put you directly in touch with Laura so you have the opportunity to follow up.
And I would second that in this issue of predominantly ICE has used, and I believe this was Laura Rotelow's quote, that an ICE warrant has as much in common with an actual warrant as a potato, and so there is no legal bearing.
Well, it's on paper, at
Yeah,
least.
it's
I mean, it's like,
and so I think that is a critical issue because they look very similar, and it can be quite intimidating to stand up to somebody who is in law enforcement and that is asking you something and putting a piece of paper in your face and saying that this gives them the right to see someone. I think that is a critical issue for administrators, and whether that's somebody who's sitting at the very front desk all the way to teachers. And I didn't bring this case up because I lack the citation up for it right now, but it was from a very credible source, and I believe this case is being pursued by Iván Espinosa Madrigal from the Lawyers Committee, of a case where a principal here in Boston refused to call the police after an undocumented student reported an assault by another student, saying that the undocumented student did not have any rights and that he would not call the police because they would just deport the student. In my opinion, that's not okay. It's factually incorrect. The student still has rights by virtue of the fact that they are here and that they still operate and have all the rights that any one of us sitting here does. And the fact that a principal in the Boston school system would believe as such says that we have a critical lack of training in this area. It's not something that we have known how to deal with before. And I think, if anything, these are issues that we really need to consider in depth. How can we give continued training? Because we're not sure exactly what will happen with these expanded priorities, and in which ways ICE will now operate that they haven't operated before. The sensitive locations memo is just a memo. At any point in time, it could just not exist or not be followed any longer. There is nothing binding there. And so I think it is imperative that on our side, we have something that is binding, because we should not place our faith in a non-binding document or policy.
well, I think, you touched on something that's incredibly important, a distinction between warrants. That's a lot to ask anyone to be able to parse, never mind whether
warrant
it's
versus
a classroom
an actual
teacher, a
warrant.
guidance counselor, or a school principal. It brings back to training, and I think as a city, we need to provide that to all of our employees. And I would certainly, maybe not mandatory, but certainly open it to parents and students. I know your organization is doing Know Your Rights. I'm sure you're incredibly busy with these, across the Commonwealth right now. We really need to do that. And I think there's the basic Know Your Rights as an individual, but to then, have it a little more sophisticated, to someone say, I think we've all seen the movies or the TV shows where the police, use a takeout menu and say, this is a warrant, let me in. And, while that may make for good entertainment, it's obviously asking a lot of someone. I think myself and Councilor Flaherty are both attorneys. I would still have to sit and read it for some time. And when someone's looking over your shoulder and they've got a gun on their hip and a badge on their chest, that's not going to be a comfortable situation for anyone to be in. So I do think, and I appreciate that our public school representative and the folks in the mayor's office are looking into doing more training. I think that's incredibly important. Whatever this ordinance, whether as written or changed or whatever form it takes, we need to have training what people's rights are, everyone's rights under the U.S. Constitution, and further under the Constitution of the Commonwealth, which in many ways is more protective. I think in particular when we have a governor who has allowed our state agencies to engage in enforcement practices, we need to make sure we're fully up on that. I would also like to say, I know Councilor Jackson mentioned it briefly, when this body is having hearings on ordinances, and this is not directed to all of you, but we and the Corporation Council has concerns or suggestions or comments on this, they need to be here. And Alejandro has left, but I see some folks in the mayor's office are still here. They are the attorneys for both the city council, the mayor, the city at large. The fact that we're talking about an important ordinance with constitutional, statutory implications in our school system, and Councilor Flaherty and I, although we're the chair and vice chair of this committee, are the only attorneys around the table, so to speak, is not helpful in moving swiftly. So, that's not to, talk to anyone, on this current panel, but I think it's incredibly important that we have them at the table so we can move swiftly on this. So I want to thank you for your work. I apologize. I do have a prior commitment in my district, which I'll be heading to, but thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Zachem. Chair recognizes Anissa Rasabi George.
Thank you,
Patiently waiting.
Chairman. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. I am most concerned about the lack of training that our teachers and our frontline staff haven't received in our schools. I think that is because at that level, that's where you are with our kids. You are on the front line. You are the one alleviating or attempting to any fears, but then also on the front line should something happen. And school faculty, whether teachers and security staff and administrators, need to be trained. So I think one of the certain outcomes of this hearing, and although sometimes it takes time to get to ordinance, is that request for very specific training, especially considering this is the end of the school year. How are we going to go forward for the upcoming school year? But then also, how are we as a school system responding to the needs of our kids during the summer? Because you are teachers, because you are in the field, and able to sort of understand the kids' fears every day, summer staff isn't always tuned in. And our need to also train them and to make sure that they're prepared to respond to kids' fears, but also prepared to respond should they need to, is really important. And I think it's a piece that we can get done in the meantime, really put pressure on the school department to get that done, both, adding some teeth and some bite to their policies, and to really, I want to say improve the training, but there's been no training, to really give staff the tools they need to support their kids. So it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. And it is sad and frustrating because as I tend to be or try to be a hopeful person, I wish that we were doing this work already, and it's so important for us to do this work for our kids now more than ever. But I look forward to pushing BPS on that in particular. And my sister, I think, was with you at Latin Academy as an intern this last year, and was very excited to participate in your work, and talked quite a bit about the Unafraid Educators and how it made her feel as a educator in training, to be among you and other colleagues, to really promote that work and support our kids, because that's what we're there. We're there to teach, we're there to support, but and to love our kids, but really give them the tools they need to be successful for the rest of their lives. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes City Councilor Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have to, at the outset, express my regret that I can't remain for the duration. This is commencement season, and I have one that I need to get ready for. But it does remind us, so many of the commencement exercises that we've been participating in throughout our school district, our valedictorians and salutatorians and students receiving full rides to school have been immigrants. And despite many of them living in constant fear and on the margins, have overcome tremendous hardship. And so it is incredibly heartening to see us coming together to affirm that immigrants' rights are human rights, and to acknowledge the contributions of immigrant and refugees to our school communities, and to our city and our Commonwealth. I want to thank each and every one of you for what you're doing every day. Thank you for your impassioned, eloquent testimony. Thank you for your conviction. I want to thank Councilor Jackson for his leadership in bringing this forward, and also for reminding us the day that this was introduced in council chambers, that this is certainly the manifestation of the advocacy and the vision and the power of our young people. So shout out to St. Stephen's. I remember Councilor Jackson and I were there for Martin Luther King Day for a service activity, and we were first prompted with this question. And as allies to our immigrant and refugee neighbors and neighbors, and as policymakers and elected officials, it was certainly unnerving for us to not be able to substantively allay and assuage the anxieties and to diffuse the tension that everyone was feeling at that moment, so palpable. And we know that trauma is a barrier to learning, and we know that our young people are already prematurely saddled with so many adult burdens, fear of displacement, the trauma of homelessness, the trauma of poverty, the trauma of food insecurity, the trauma of experiencing or being exposed to violence. And now this is just one more thing, the trauma and the fear of deportation to add to that list. And so, I said at a Pride event over the weekend that all of this reminds me of what Dr. King once said, and that is that although laws may not change hearts, they do restrain the reckless. And there is a lot of reckless activity happening in Washington, D.C. And if there was ever a time that we need to restrain the reckless, it is right now. And this is very similar to Title IX. So although there was great work being done on college campuses and in communities to create safe spaces and to tell people, to tell women, you will not be discriminated against. You will not be subject to harassment. That we had to double down and reaffirm that commitment, later adding sexual violence to that roster, to that list of requirements, to reaffirm our commitment to our values and to offer more than organic support and symbolic gestures, but through lawmaking and policy, let people know that we saw as a civil right that you should feel safe in your own body and not worry about that threat. So to me, this is very similar. And so again, I thank all of you. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councilor Jackson. Thank you to St. Stephen's. And again, thank you to our educators and our advocates, Mira and ACLU.
And, you know, you mentioned the salutatorians and valedictorians. I know at least 3 of them are undocumented.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just want to note the interesting component that, Liza, you brought up around the Attorney General Sessions definition. With that definition, that also addresses one of the other pushes that people have brought forward to me, is whether or not we would lose funding.
Yeah.
And so with that said, I think it is really critical that under the current definition, we actually don't fall under that. That really speaks to that objection of actually losing either federal funding for schools and or any of the other programs that we currently get not enough federal funds from, but that we get federal funding from.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all for your testimony, for your time and attention, for the value added. Great partners in this effort. So I look forward to working with you moving forward. So that will conclude panel 2. Thank you. And you're more than welcome to stay. I know that we have a third panel and we have public testimony. So if I can call upon Janet Munoz, Rafaela Polanco, and it looks like, is there a representative from Student Immigrant Movement? So if you could make your way down, and same thing, just come right down and sit in front of us. And then right after this panel, we're going to get into public testimony, and we'll start with, looks like May Belen Perez and Martha Rodriguez, followed by looks like Mara Romero. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
And if you could just introduce yourself and any affiliation you have for the record, and then you have the floor to discuss this issue.
Mi nombre es Rafaela Polanco. Pertenezco al grupo de padres de San Steven.
Sure, you can.
Rafaela Polanco, and I belong to the parent group at St. Stephen's.
Como grupo, pensamos que la familia es la institución más importante del mundo.
As a group, we think that family is the most important institution in the world.
Y por eso creemos que tener familia separada sería un verdadero crimen.
And for that reason, we think that separating families would be a real crime.
Con la separación de familias, estaríamos fomentando niños con deficiencias, frustraciones y con muy bajo nivel de formación.
By separating families, we would be creating children with deficiencies who are frustrated and who have a very low level of development.
Conozco la historia de una amiga que tiene 4 hijos y vive aquí desde el 2009.
I know the story of a friend of mine who has 4 kids, and she's lived here since 2009.
2 de sus hijos no quieren ir a la escuela por temor a que su madre sea separada de ellos al recogerlos en la escuela.
2 of her children don't want to go to school because they're afraid that their mom will be separated from them when she comes to pick them up from school.
Literalmente dice, mami, no salgamos a la escuela porque no quiero que nos separen de ti, como lo hicieron con papi.
Literally, they say, Mommy, we don't want to go to school because we don't want to be separated from you, like they did with Dad.
Pensamos como grupo que apoyar la creación de las escuelas santuaria sería de gran tranquilidad para todas las familias que, como esta de mi amiga, se encuentran indocumentados. Por eso, apoyamos que pase la ley y la creación de las escuelas santuarias. Muchas gracias.
As a group, we support the creation of sanctuary schools because it would be such a great thing for all of our families to hear, especially for those families like my friend that are undocumented. For that reason, we support the creation of sanctuary schools and the law.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Gracias por darnos la oportunidad de
Muy
estar
bien.
acá compartiendo nuestras historias.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here sharing our stories.
Está bien.
Mi nombre es Janet. Les voy a hablar de mi niña de 9 años que a su corta edad ha cambiado de jugar con sus muñecas y amigos por ver las noticias y en especial temas de inmigración.
I'm going to talk to you about my 9-year-old daughter, who at her young age has stopped playing with her dolls and friends and instead just watches the news, especially stories about immigration.
Y ella me pregunta, mami, ¿por qué a nosotros los inmigrantes no nos quieren en este país?
And she asks me, Mommy, why doesn't this country like immigrants?
Si lo único que tú haces es trabajar duro y hacer las cosas bien.
If all you've done is work hard and do things right.
Tú me has enseñado lo importante de vivir en comunidad, de respeto a los demás y hacer lo correcto en donde quiera que estés.
You've shown me the importance of living in community, of respecting others, and of doing the right thing no matter where you are.
Y yo me pregunto, ¿cómo puede ser que Estados Unidos, siendo un país que aboga por los derechos humanos,
And I wonder, how could it be that the United States, a country that advocates for the defense of human rights,
paradójicamente es donde más se están violando actualmente?
paradoxically, is where they're currently most being violated?
La educación es un derecho fundamental.
Education is a fundamental right.
Es por eso que nuestros niños merecen tener una educación en planteles escolares seguros,
That is why our kids deserve to have an education on safe school campuses,
y donde su estatus migratorio no interfiera con su estabilidad física, mental y emocional.
and where their immigration status doesn't interfere with their physical, mental, and emotional stability.
Como padres, tenemos la obligación de abogar y exigir un compromiso de nuestras autoridades, proclamando de nuestras escuelas como lugares santuarios.
As parents, we are obligated to advocate and to demand a commitment from our elected officials, proclaiming our schools sanctuary schools.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Welcome.
Buenas tardes, mi
Buenas
nombre es
tardes.
Mayra Romero.
Good afternoon. My name is Mayra Romero.
Pertenezco al grupo de padres de San Steven. Como madre que pertenezco,
I am part of the parent group at St. Stephen's.
como madre que pertenezco, pienso que convertir las escuelas
As a mother that belongs to that group, I think that converting schools,
las escuelas de Boston en escuelas santuarias
I think that converting schools, the schools in Boston into sanctuary schools,
dará a muchas familias que conozco,
puede estar un poco más. Puede estar la
dará a muchas familias que conozco una gran tranquilidad y estabilidad emocional.
That converting Boston schools into sanctuary schools would give many families that I know much greater peacefulness and peace of mind and stability.
Ustedes como consejero de la ciudad de Boston, pienso que dará un apoyo histórico.
For you as city councilors in Boston, I think this would be a historic moment.
Para todos los estudiantes que se encuentran indocumentados, muchas gracias por su apoyo.
For all of the students that are undocumented. Thank you for your support.
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Maybelline Perez. I'm 19 years old. I senior at East Boston High School. I'm originally from El Salvador. I grew up surrounded by gang violence, drugs, rapes, and murder. My family and I migrated to the United States in order to survive death. We had been victims of extortion, and the last time it happened, we were threatened with murder. In 2010, my family and I fled to the United States in hopes for survival. Violence has taken away from me my safety in childhood, and now it's separating me from my country. Today, I'm here testifying for BPS to be sanctuary schools because my education is the only thing violence never took away. The story I tell is not unique to me. As you know, there are more than 11 million documented immigrants in the United States currently facing discrimination, hate, crimes, job exploitation, and deportation. We live in fear of deportation, and those who've seen their families deported bleed their pain each day. Despite so many injustices, we are resilient people who will never give up until justice is served. Today, I'm here testifying in front of all of you to make Boston Public Schools sanctuary schools. I worry for myself and parents who have to work every day and use public transportation, not knowing if they'll make it back home safe. I worry for my little brother who's currently studying the 7th grade and who, like me, has big aspirations. My little brother and I are not the only ones who aspire higher education. There are many undocumented students who also do as well. Many of them who are homeless or come from broken families, and the only place they feel safe is at school. School is their home. All we want is to study without any fear, and it is inhumane and morally wrong to take us away the right of education. These past 6 years have not been easy to me at school, knowing I'm undocumented, but I'm proud of how far I've made it. Being in my class as current valedictorian shows me that with my hard work and perseverance, anything is possible. I have not yet made it, but every day I'm closer to. Without BPS education, I wouldn't be where I am today. I want other students who are under the same situation as me to also be on top of their class and take advantage of education. I don't want to be an outlier. I want to be one more. I want safer education for us. Please don't take it away. Thank you.
Thank you all for your participation. And what was your name, ma'am?
I'm Ariel Brands.
Good. Thank you for your assistance here. So thank you for your courage and your testimony, and appreciate your input. Councilor Jackson, any?
I would just, I want to thank the parents who've stepped forward to advocate not only for your children, but you are parents to all of the children in the city of Boston. And we also understand that the young people that you're talking about, they're all of our children. And those young people who are documented are connected to those children. And so the hurt and pain and that stress actually is not only borne on the shoulders of those young people, but in those families, but also in people across the Boston Public Schools. And also it is our burden too, as city councilors who represent, Councilor Flaherty represents every single neighborhood in the city of Boston. He's an at-large councilor, even though he's smaller than me. But he's an at-large councilor. But it is really critical that you understand that. And I want to thank you, young lady, for courage, but also ensuring and showing us what excellence looks like. You are the valedictorian of your class. And in spite of, with all of the things that have been on your shoulders and on your mind and on your heart every single day, you went and showed us what excellence looked like. I heard all these GPAs in that room that were above a 4.0. As someone who was in the high twos, I didn't understand what being above a 4.0 meant. But I think it shows what we would be losing if we didn't do what we need to do here. We would be underdeveloping a significant portion of our city and the future of our city, which looks like, sounds like, and is you. So I just want to thank you. And also, I want to thank you for the courage.
Thank
you to say what you said today publicly. That is something very, very courageous. And you are the face of courageous leadership in the city of Boston, and you deserve to continue to lead. And we will stand with you in your leadership. Keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you all. So that'll conclude this panel, and we're going to go to public testimony. If there's anyone here wishing to offer public testimony that has not signed the sheet, you can do so over there. And just ask that this panel is excused, so you're welcome to stay. And then we have these two podiums here for public testimony. So I'm going to call upon Mary Belen Perez, if she can come down to this podium, and if Martha Rodriguez can come down to this podium. And then we have, looks like Myra Romero. She can queue up behind this podium. And if there's any additional public testimony, or if you've signed the sheet and you've indicated no, but that you've changed your mind, you want to offer testimony, you may do so by coming down and queuing up behind the individuals who have signed up for public testimony. Thank you, Kerry. Anyone wishing to offer public testimony may do so now. This is the public testimony portion. We've indicated that May Belen Perez has indicated a willingness. Martha Rodriguez has indicated a willingness, as has Myra Romero. So last call for public testimony. Make them down now or forever hold your peace. Seeing and hearing no desire to do so, that'll conclude the public testimony piece, and we'll allow Councilor Jackson, by way of a wrap-up, just to conclude, and then we'll conclude this hearing.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Councilor Flaherty for his flexibility and his willingness to expedite this very important hearing. I think it is critical that we actually move forward with speed in ensuring that we push this through before the end of our session. I think it's critical because we need to have teachers and school leaders in classrooms and in schools where they can definitively answer a question. Hearing from teachers saying that, speaking of the discomfort that they have in not being able to assure young people in their classroom or their families that they will be safe. Listening to mothers who are saying that children are not playing with toys anymore and are looking at the media and the hysteria that is currently surrounding Washington, D.C. We live in a day and age now where city government is way more important than it was. I believe it's always been of the utmost importance, but we are the front line of change. We are the front line of advocacy, and we are the front line of the resistance that we need to have against what is going on in the name of our country and in the name of our state and in the name of our city. We cannot stand idly by and allow young people and families to be fearful as they go into our school buildings on our watch and our time. It is time that we step up for these issues and to push forward on these problems and ensure that we all are protecting our students, our parents, and our families. That is, to me, the most important component. And I will also not only tie this to the moral components of the city of Boston, but also to the economic components of the city of Boston. The future of the city of Boston looks like the young people who sat before us today. The preponderance of young people in the city of Boston are young people of color. And if we don't have a group of young people who are ascending, who are educated at the highest of levels and are able to compete at the highest of levels, we actually risk the city of Boston not being on the same level as it has before. So in addition to the future leadership of a government, this is the future leadership of business and future leadership of nonprofits and across the board. So it is absolutely critical that we stand on the highest of moral grounds. And by the way, you know what? There's risk in terms of what is going to happen in D.C. and what they'll do. But I would say if the money says that we have to turn young people over to the feds, or we can't protect our young people, I don't want that money. If that's what the attachment is for that money, that is not the type of dollars or those types of dollars that we need. Again, this is a time where we need courageous leadership, and we can hearken back to the times of the past. Well, you know what? Gandhi's not coming back. Martin Luther King is not coming back. Harriet Tubman is not coming back. We are that courageous leadership that we have to stand up for. And again, the resistance is today, and we legislatively resist what is going on, and we are going to resist with legislation, but we're going to resist with compassion, we're going to resist with righteousness, and we're going to resist on the side of justice. And that's where we stand, and we have an opportunity to lead in the city of Boston and not follow relative to these issues. Maybe nobody else, whether people have done it in other places or not, we must step up and do right by the young people of the city of Boston. And I look forward to expediting this legislation to our young people and their families are going into potentially summer school, which I had to attend a couple times, Council Flaherty, and knowing that they will be safe in that environment. And then they can all walk into a school year in September where we know that our teachers, our school leaders, and their staff can actually say that they are safe in the school buildings in which the city of Boston owns. Thank you so much. Thank you, St. Stephen's. Thank you, young people, for going too fast, for pushing us too hard, and for ensuring that we are here today to do this. I look forward to working with the council as well as our mayor to ensure that we get this done and we expedite this. Thank you so much, Councilor Flaherty.
Let me thank Councilor Jackson for being the lead sponsor. Thank our very capable interpreters for assisting us for this hearing, and thank those that participated in the panel as well as those that offered testimony from your experience, whether it's students, whether it was faculty, whether it was parents, and other leaders in our community. And so with that, I would suggest to Councilor Jackson and I work out any of the legal issues that Corporation Council may or may not have on this, and either move for a vote of the council and or a working session. So we'll figure out, based on our conversations with the law department, as to sort of what the next steps are, but we'll be sure to keep all of you abreast of those developments and get something turned around in a relatively short period of time. So with that, with respect to docket 0760, ordinance creating the Sanctuary School Act, the Committee on Government Operations is adjourned. Thank you.